Nate, so I'm taking a page out of Hollywood today.
Ooh.
And I am digging up the corpse of an old series that we used to make. It's Why Games Are Hard or Easy to Make. And I am going to shine that sucker up and put it out in the limelight and see if we can get a few people to watch the video.
Are we talking about Lenin here?
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, in Hollywood, they're always like, oh, we're out of ideas. Let's actually reboot Inspector Gadget as a weird erotic film. Oh, okay, let's do that. They always, like, come up with these weird ideas. Maybe I'm on the wrong site. Anyways, I did want to talk today about the X-Men, why a game for them would actually be pretty difficult to make, why a lot of them really suck, at least since the old arcade games, and our ideas for one, as non-professional game developers who have never developed a game at all. So that's a thing. Hey, if you enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. We put up a video yesterday about Star Wars that YouTube didn't send out to anybody. So if you haven't seen that yet, please check it out. So let's hop right into it. This is not a top 5. We're just going to discuss. The thing with the X-Men is there's so many characters. This is something you and I have talked about. Now, a lot of them are lame. Like, not the main ones, but I'm just saying there's, like, side X-Men that are, like, unimportant. No one cares.
Right.
But there's also just a massive, iconic library of previous X-Men, really going back since, the 80s, especially. I would say was kind of like one of the glory days of the X-Men. And so it kind of comes down to who do you actually use because of quite a few things. I think one of the main things we wanted to talk about was balancing the characters' abilities and progression. So it's like making everyone feel like they matter, actually.
Right, and also some of the characters have harder abilities, I would say, to animate and put into a game than others. Like, for example, as cool as Nightcrawler is, that's actually kind of difficult to put him into a game. Especially if it's like a multiplayer game. Where you're on the internet battling with other people or something and you're teleporting across the screen.
Well, and how far would you have him teleport,
Right.
Because we also have something like in Marvel Ultimate Alliance. In Ultimate Alliance, there were a couple of characters that could kind of teleport, Deadpool being one of them.
Right.
But it didn't do much.
No, you just teleported like
10
5 feet in front of you.
Yeah,
it was like nothing.
It wasn't a big deal. So that's another thing too, is it will get into what type of game it is, but also if you are going to include those characters with harder to use abilities, you would have to probably make it single player.
Right.
Because let's say you want to have Nightcrawler teleport. The easiest way to do that is basically just to freeze the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
Have you move like an indicator as to where you want to teleport and then tap X or A.
Right.
But you can't do that in an online game. So then, if you include that character, it would
mess with that.
Yeah, you'd have to go in a specific direction. Also with this, by the way, in terms of abilities and progression, there's other ones that are difficult too. You mentioned Rogue. So if you play as Rogue, let's say that she touches Wolverine. Does she now get to heal instantly? I mean, that's an easy one to animate. But let's say now she, bumps an enemy. Well, is she able to take abilities from every enemy in the game?
Right.
Or not some? Or how does this work? Or is it only other mutants? What do you do with Rogue? I mean, there's a lot of characters like that, too.
Right. Or even like Mystique.
Yeah.
How would Mystique even work? Now, Mystique is a villain, so you probably want to play as her, but how would that character work? If, let's say, she was playable, would you be able to, like, transform yourself into anyone?
Well,
and then just randomly also kind of fight like them or whatever?
Be
acrobatic.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's the big problem is it really limits what type of game this is. I think that you would have to develop it as a single player game.
Right.
And if you were going to go this route of being in depth with every character, you'd also pretty much have to go almost a linear level based world.
Right.
Where like you have a level designed for Mystique and a level designed for Cyclops and for Wolverine and stuff like that. And that could be really cool. But when you start branching out to more characters like this, you start to have a lot of issues. I think as well, one you had about was the story, because you kind of have this same problem with storytelling when you go outside of a handful of main characters.
Yeah, it was kind of the issue that the Avengers had with the story was when you start having more than like 2 or 3 main characters, you start getting into the story being actually more difficult to make the player care about all the characters. And caring about your main characters is a pretty crucial part to a story, to any story really. So if you are making a game, and let's say there's like 10 or 15 main X-Men characters, which is insane, by the way, but let's say there is, how are you going to make a story that makes the player actually care about those X-Men characters instead of just making it a very surfacey game that's like, oh, this is kind of just fun. Well, that's not good.
Yeah, and people are going to point to Ultimate Alliance and X-Men Legends, right, I would say, as like the example of how you do this. Here's the thing, though, with that. Not every character has a very in-depth story in those games.
Right.
Because there's such a wide roster, what it means is that almost all of the responses are generic. Mm-hmm. There's a few that are specific. So, like, for example, if you brought Captain America into that battle with Winter Soldier, he might say something. But he might, someone else might not if Cap isn't in the team.
Right.
But that's it. That was the extent of, like, the individual storylines. And so then it kind of makes it so that all of the, not to meme on the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite meme from forever ago, but there was a joke in the community where they were kind of criticizing how small the roster was. And the point was, well, the characters are just functions. And what that means is that people like playing as Magneto because they like what he can do, not because they like Magneto. And everyone was like, no, people like Magneto and they like what he can do. I mean, like, they're playing an X-Men game because it's X-Men, just like Marvel versus Capcom. It's like because they like Capcom and Marvel.
Right.
Or they could just go play Street Fighter, or they could just go play Mortal Kombat or whatever. The characters are a draw in any of these games. And so because of that, your characters do need to be fully fleshed out. That's why I think it would be easiest if you're going to do something like this to make it either single player and level based, but I think that would end up being a little shallow, switching between tons of characters.
Right.
Or just make games for different characters.
Yeah, like just make a Wolverine game.
Or Cyclops. But I just don't think that would sell. That's the other problem. Is X-Men sells, Wolverine sells. You're going to slap Mystique on a game and sell that? I don't think you are.
And make her hot, he would.
Maybe. Maybe, but I will say I think a lot of the problem, too, is that I think the games market has shown such a heavy interest in just a couple things.
Right.
Like Spider-Man and Batman. That nobody wants to take a chance on making lesser-known heroes because they're like, why would I bother?
Right. Yeah, you basically have to just go all or nothing.
Yeah.
With the X-Men.
So, and that's the problem with like a Mystique game or a Cyclops game or whatever.
Right.
You can get away with it with a few people. Wolverine probably being the main one.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't think you could. Professor X Simulator. Just go sit in Cerebro and find new mutants. It's kind of like Tube Simulator. And then you just go send people out to get them and they come back and there you go, it's The Sims. I don't know, another one that we did have too, other than the story, this ties into the story, I will say, and I don't want to go heavily into this point because it could be a, controversial thing. The X-Men is about people who don't fit in. It has been used as an allegory for racism forever. Mm-hmm. Do you want to deal with that in modern day, like America especially? You know what I mean? And can you? And what I mean by that is not, are those stories told? They absolutely are. But they're usually handled poorly on one end or the other. It's usually either like people are like, well, that could have been good, but it came off really preachy and not impactful, and I don't care. Like, it just didn't do anything for anybody.
Right.
Or it's like, oh, that was like not handled well at all. It's like that was
problematic.
Well, or insensitive or whatever.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not even saying I agree with either of those things. It's like if you want to tell a story and you can tell a good story, like, tell the story.
Right.
Black Klansman is offensive. Spike Lee worked on that.
Right.
I don't think Spike Lee's like some awful person for making Black Klansman. There was a point to it. It was still offensive, and you can like or dislike the movie, but it being offensive or handled well or whatever was not really the point. But I do think that in gaming, it would probably see more scrutiny. It seems like games are under more...
They're under the limelight a lot more.
Yeah, they're more insulted. People can look the other way on a movie they don't agree with, but if people get a game they don't agree with, they throw a tizzy fit.
Right.
We just saw that with the big boobed game from not Cyberpunk, but that Cyberpunk Sense game. It was like from a smaller company.
Oh, okay.
Top Hat Studios, I believe, is publishing it, and like there were tons of people sending them death threats because it objectified women. But meanwhile, like, James Bond will come out and he'll just like obliterate some chick in the movie, and it'll be like, oh, James Bond's back.
Right.
It seems like people disconnect more with movies, and for some reason, the Karens of the world are very quick to get angry at gaming.
Right.
And that's what I mean. Like, how do you handle an issue like this when you're already under scrutiny so much?
Right. Especially when it's such a hot button issue nowadays.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, exactly. You basically have to make the game perfect.
Right, and you're not going to.
Right. So, yeah, I think that's definitely something that's very difficult to handle.
Yeah.
You know, I think maybe 10 years ago it probably would have been a little easier because everyone wasn't on, like, super edge.
And maybe 10 years from now.
Maybe 10 years from now, but...
Like, right now, I don't know if that's really something you'd get into. We even saw that with Miles Morales.
Right.
I would have thought that they would have gone more in depth with some of that stuff from certain things that they included in promo.
Yeah.
But they really don't address it.
No.
And I think it's because, like, it's not something you want to address right now because you could get in trouble or cause a problem.
If you say the wrong thing, you can get in trouble.
Yes. On either side of that issue.
So I think
someone will be mad at you.
I think a lot of these companies just take the safe route with this issue and they maybe just throw in the quick thing.
Right.
And be like, hey, look at us. But then that comes across as fake.
Oh, it absolutely does.
And
I will say, I don't think you would have seen that, you know, X-Men from 2000. The movie opened in Auschwitz. Do you really think they would have done that now? I don't.
Right.
Like, I just don't think they would.
Right. Because that wasn't really a safe choice.
No, absolutely not. But X-Men wasn't a safe movie to make either. It was a big risk at the time.
Right.
I just wanted to throw that in there because it's such a complicated issue as well. Is there anything else you want to talk about with this? I mean, I know that one took up the last few minutes because it's probably the most serious.
Right.
But overall, it's like game design. What type of game do you make? Progression, abilities, story with multiple characters, the actual implications of what it's always been about.
Yeah, I think those are kind of the main issues with the X-Men. You know, and also you go into the thing of story with where do you even go from the story? Mm-hmm. Is this an origin game? Is it like, oh, Professor X is wheeling around rounding up the X-Men? Mm-hmm. Or is this like a game where they're already the X-Men?
Right.
So I guess that also goes into what kind of game do you want.
Well, and I do want to say, too, in that regard, they tried doing an outside perspective on the story before. X-Men Destiny was designed where you played as a new mutant, not the New Mutants, but like
a brand new one.
Brand new original character mutant that you created. Essentially, and you were going through the game and you were meeting different X-Men, but because of that, your character was pretty poorly written and uninteresting,
right,
and bland, because they wanted anyone to be able to be that character. And then also you ended up meeting other X-Men and they just kind of do their thing and leave, so it'd be like you're a tourist in the X-Men universe. Which isn't really probably what people want from an X-Men game either.
Right.
So hey, let us know what you think in the comments down below. Would you like to see an X-Men game? How would you want it handled? How would you handle different elements of this story with things that are maybe more sensitive? Would you move away from those? What type of game would you want to make? Personally, I'm at the point where I kind of am good on live service superhero games for a while. It didn't really work out amazing
after Avengers
last time, so maybe we can come back to that idea in the future. Not right now. But anyways, let me know what you think. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this. Leave a like. I appreciate it very much, and I will see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day, and as always, stay shway.